I opened my mouth to protest, but before I could, he was there. His lips meeting mine in a kiss so sudden and consuming that I couldn't breathe. It was soft at first, tentative, but quickly deepened, a desperate, unrestrained hunger building between us. I tried to pull away, tried to remind myself of the boundaries I had sworn to uphold, but my body betrayed me. His hands were on my back, pulling me against him, and I couldn't help but feel the warmth of his chest pressed against mine. The intensity of the kiss consuming every thought, every ounce of control I had left. My heart pounded wildly in my chest as his hands slid down my sides, moving with deliberate slowness, as if testing whether I would pull away. But I didn't. I couldn't. The world outside seemed to disappear as I gave in to the heat building between us, each kiss more frantic than the last. Before we begin, I need to warn you. This story explores mature themes, including emotional turmoil, the complexities of marriage and infidelity. If these topics make you uncomfortable, you may want to stop reading now. It was a hot summer morning in the bustling suburbs of Philadelphia. The air felt dense with humidity, and my long veil clung to the back of my neck as I stood in front of the grand, pristine house I now worked for. The transition from the quiet, sun-baked streets of Tunisia to the relentless pace of American life had been overwhelming. I had never imagined leaving behind everything I knew, my family, my country, and my carefully structured life. But here I was living out the dream I thought was unattainable. My name is Layla, and I was 28 years old when I first stepped into the Williams family's home. They were a picture-perfect family of 4, seemingly content and flawless in every way. Their search for a live-in nanny had led me here, but for me it wasn't just about finding a job. It was about proving I could thrive in a foreign land. I had always been fiercely independent, a rare trait for a young woman from my small town. Maggie Williams, the mother, was the epitome of poise and elegance. Her designer outfits and expensive perfume filled the air as she moved through the house with the confidence of someone accustomed to the finer things in life. Her blonde hair was always tied up neatly in a bun, and she spoke in a crisp, polished manner that almost seemed rehearsed. Her husband, Daniel, was a tall man with a quiet charm. His brown eyes were always warm, though there was something deeper, almost guarded beneath the surface. He smiled easily and carried a sense of reassurance that immediately put anyone at ease. He wasn't chatty, but his presence was comforting. Then there were the children: Lucas, a hyperactive 6-year-old boy, and Isla, a sweet but curious 4-year-old girl. They were both full of energy, asking a million questions every day, and I quickly found myself swept up in their world of innocence and endless wonder. My first few days were spent getting to know their routines. I made breakfast, packed Lucas's school lunch, and played games with Isla. It was a whirlwind of activity that left me tired but fulfilled at the end of each day. I had my own small room in the basement, and though it was far from luxurious, it became a quiet sanctuary where I could reflect on the path I had chosen. But one afternoon, about a month into my new life in this strange country, I noticed Daniel looking at me differently. It was subtle at first, a glance that lingered too long, a soft smile that seemed to carry a hidden meaning. I tried to brush it off, but the more time I spent in the Williams household, the more I became aware of the tension simmering beneath the surface. "Layla, you're incredible with the kids," Daniel said one afternoon as I was sorting laundry in the living room. His voice was calm, almost intimate, as he leaned against the doorway watching me work. I looked up, startled by the unexpected compliment. "Oh, thank you, Mr. Williams," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Please call me Daniel," he replied, his smile widening. His gaze didn't leave mine, and I couldn't help but feel a strange warmth spread through me. At home, I was used to a different kind of interaction. In Tunisia, men rarely spoke to women without an underlying motive, but Daniel's words seemed genuine. This kindness, so simple and unassuming, caught me off guard. Days passed and I found myself growing more aware of him. The way he always asked if I had eaten lunch, how he offered to help with the groceries, the way he stood in the doorway of the kitchen when I cooked. And it wasn't just his actions, it was the way he looked at me, like he saw more than just the nanny. It felt like he noticed me as a person, not just as a caretaker. Maggie's work trips became more frequent, and soon it was just Daniel, the children, and me in the house. Without Maggie's constant presence, the atmosphere shifted, and the boundaries I had so carefully built between myself and Daniel began to blur. It started with small moments: shared laughter, lingering glances and brief conversations that lasted a little too long. Yet, deep down I knew I was treading dangerous ground. At night, after the children were asleep, I would retreat to my room, feeling guilty for the thoughts I couldn't shake. I prayed for clarity, for guidance, but the truth was, I didn't want to ignore the pull I felt toward Daniel. I tried to remind myself of my upbringing, the values I was raised with. I was a devout Muslim woman committed to my faith, and I knew that this connection with Daniel could never be more than fleeting. Yet, as the summer dragged on, it became harder to push my feelings aside. The more time I spent in his presence, the more my resolve weakened. I had always prided myself on my ability to stay true to my beliefs, but Daniel was different. The days became longer, the heat of summer only adding to the palpable tension that simmered between Daniel and me. I tried to focus on the children, Lucas and Isla of course, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something between us had shifted irrevocably. Every glance from Daniel, every casual brush of his hand as we moved around the house, seemed to draw me closer to a precipice I knew I should never approach. It was a Thursday evening when it finally happened. The night when the unspoken bond we shared broke through the surface, like a dam bursting. Maggie had left for another one of her work trips, this time for an entire week. The house was quieter than usual, save for the sound of Lucas's laughter echoing from the living room as he and Isla played. I had finished tidying up the kitchen and was preparing a late dinner when Daniel appeared in the doorway, his presence instantly filling the room. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, his gaze fixed on me. There was something new in the air, something charged that I couldn't deny. "Layla," he said finally, his voice low. "Can I ask you something?" I turned to face him, the warmth of the kitchen light casting soft shadows on his face. His shirt was slightly unbuttoned, his sleeves rolled up, and I could feel my pulse race at the sight of him standing there, so effortlessly handsome, yet so incredibly distant in every way that mattered. It was the first time in weeks that he had been this still, his usually playful energy replaced with something far more serious, and it unsettled me. "Of course," I replied, forcing my voice to remain steady as I wiped my hands on the dish towel. He took a few steps closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "Do you ever wonder what your life could have been, Layla? If you hadn't come here? If you hadn't met us?" I swallowed hard. His words stung, hitting a raw nerve that had been festering for days. I was trying so hard to keep everything in place, to remain loyal to my family, my faith, but the truth was I had begun to question everything. Every moment spent with him made me feel things I knew I shouldn't. I started, but he interrupted, his voice growing softer, more intense. "It's just that, since you've been here I've been more alive. You've made this house feel like a home, Layla." His words hung in the air like a confession, and before I could even process them, he took another step closer. For a moment the world around us seemed to freeze. His proximity, his words, the way his dark eyes searched mine. Everything felt overwhelming, and I could no longer pretend I didn't feel it too. "Daniel, we shouldn't," I began, but the words trailed off, lost in the heavy air between us. I could feel the heat rising in my chest as he stepped closer still, his hand gently brushing mine, sending a shock of electricity through me. "I know, Layla," he said softly, his voice trembling with something raw, something urgent. "But I can't stop thinking about you. It's all I think about when I'm here, when you're near me. I've never felt like this before. Not with anyone." I opened my mouth to protest, but before I could, he was there. His lips meeting mine in a kiss so sudden and consuming that I couldn't breathe. It was soft at first, tentative, but quickly deepened, a desperate, unrestrained hunger building between us. I tried to pull away, tried to remind myself of the boundaries I had sworn to uphold, but my body betrayed me. His hands were on my back, pulling me against him, and I couldn't help but feel the warmth of his chest pressed against mine. The intensity of the kiss consuming every thought, every ounce of control I had left. My heart pounded wildly in my chest as his hands slid down my sides, moving with deliberate slowness, as if testing whether I would pull away. But I didn't. I couldn't. The world outside seemed to disappear as I gave in to the heat building between us, each kiss more frantic than the last. "Layla," he murmured against my lips, his breath warm and ragged. "I don't care about the rules anymore. I don't care about anything but you." And then, before I could think or speak, He lifted me in his arms, carrying me up the stairs to his bedroom. My mind screamed at me to stop, but my body, betraying every ounce of reason, begged for more. The moment we crossed the threshold of his bedroom, everything became a blur of sensation and emotion. We shed our clothes in a flurry, the air thick with desire and guilt. His hands were everywhere, touching, exploring, and it felt like he was unlocking parts of me I didn't even know existed. I wanted to fight it. I wanted to stop, to remind myself of my faith, my culture, the life I had left behind. But in that moment, nothing mattered but the fire that burned between us, the connection that neither of us had been able to deny. Daniel's touch was electric, his lips trailing down my neck, his breath shallow and urgent. Every inch of my skin felt like it was on fire as he kissed me with a desperation that mirrored my own. There was no more hesitation, no more doubt. We were two people, drawn together by something we didn't understand but couldn't escape. As we finally gave in, surrendering to the passion that had built between us for weeks, I felt like I was losing a part of myself, yet in the same breath I felt free. For the first time since I arrived in this country, I wasn't just Layla the nanny. I wasn't just a daughter, bound by the rules of my upbringing. In that moment I was someone else entirely. But as the moment passed, reality began to set in. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, my breath coming in shallow gasps, and the weight of what had just happened began to crash down on me. What did this mean? What would happen next? Thank you for listening to the story so far. Your encouragement means a lot to me. Please comment and share your thoughts here. I love you and I am so grateful to have you on this journey with me to explore the story further. The room was heavy with the aftermath, the silence punctuated only by our labored breaths. I lay in his arms, still tangled in the sheets, my body humming with the aftermath of what we had just shared. The warmth of Daniel's touch lingered on my skin, but with it came an undeniable coldness, a creeping guilt that began to crawl over me like a shadow I couldn't escape. I shifted slightly, trying to break free from his embrace, but he held me tighter. His fingers traced gentle patterns on my back, and for a moment I forgot everything. All I could feel was him, the way he made me feel alive in a way I had never experienced before. "Layla," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Don't pull away from me." I closed my eyes, fighting the rush of conflicting emotions. I wanted to pull away, to run and never look back. But there was a part of me that didn't want to leave, that didn't want this moment to end. In my life I had been so controlled, so bound by my faith, my family's expectations. But here with him I felt free, freer than I'd ever been. "I don't know what this is, Daniel," I finally said, my voice trembling as I turned to face him. "I'm not supposed to feel this way. You have a wife, a family, and I don't even recognize myself anymore." He pulled me in closer, brushing a strand of hair from my face, his lips almost touching mine. "I don't care about the rest of the world right now. I care about you. About us." His words were a balm to the ache inside me, but they also made me feel like I was sinking deeper into something I couldn't control. I tried to ignore the rising sense of dread in the pit of my stomach, telling myself that what we had was nothing more than a fleeting moment, an indulgence in desires that could never be fulfilled. But with each touch, with every heated glance, I could feel myself being pulled back into him. The boundary that had once seemed so clear between us was now a distant memory. The next few days passed in a haze. Daniel and I became even more secretive, more careful, sneaking touches and stolen glances whenever Maggie wasn't around. It was like we were living in a different world. A world of quiet tension and unspoken promises. The children went about their daily routines, oblivious to the changes happening around them, but I knew nothing would ever be the same. It was an evening, just as the sun set and the warm glow of twilight filled the room, when I found myself in the kitchen again, chopping vegetables for dinner. Daniel had been unusually quiet that day, and I couldn't help but wonder if he was feeling the same weight of guilt that was crushing me. Suddenly he was there, standing in the doorway watching me. His gaze was intense, almost predatory, and my heart skipped a beat. "Layla," he said, his voice low and filled with urgency. "We need to talk." I froze, the knife stilling in my hand. The air between us felt thick with tension. "About what?" "About us," he said, stepping closer, his voice shaking. "I can't keep pretending like nothing happened. I can't keep ignoring what's between us." I felt my breath catch in my throat. This was it, the moment I had feared. We can't do this, Daniel. It's wrong. You have a wife. You have a family. And I. He cut me off, his eyes dark with emotion. I don't care. Maggie's always gone. She's busy with her career, and when she's here, it's like we're strangers. But with you, Layla, it's different. You make me feel alive. My heart hammered in my chest, the pull between us undeniable. But I couldn't give in again. I couldn't let myself become tangled in this mess any further. I'm not like you, I whispered, stepping back, my voice barely above a breath. I can't do this. Daniel's face softened with regret. I know it's wrong. But I can't stop thinking about you, Layla. Every moment I'm away from you feels like an eternity. You've made me feel something I haven't felt in years. I closed my eyes, the weight of his words almost suffocating. I felt as though I was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to fall into something I couldn't climb out of. He reached for me, his hand gently cupping my face, his thumb brushing over my lips. I don't want to lose you. I can't let you go. I felt his hand on my skin like fire, and all my resolve melted away. I kissed him then, my hands threading through his hair as our bodies collided with an intensity neither of us could deny. The kitchen, the world, everything else disappeared. It was just us, our mouths, our bodies, our need. But this time it was different. This time there was no hesitation. No more second-guessing. We didn't stop. There was no stopping. The days that followed were a blur of passion and guilt. Every stolen moment, every kiss, felt like both heaven and hell. Daniel and I couldn't stay away from each other. We would find time when Maggie was out, when the children were asleep, or when the house was empty. Each time felt like a secret we couldn't share with the world. Yet it consumed us completely. I found myself becoming someone I didn't recognize. Someone who could only think about him. Someone who no longer cared about the boundaries I had so carefully built around my life. But even as I reveled in the heat of our connection, I knew that it was unsustainable. The lies, the secrets, none of it could last forever. And then one fateful evening, the door opened to a truth neither of us had expected. It wasn't long before the consequences of our actions started to seep into every corner of our lives. What had once been secret and thrilling began to feel like a heavy burden. A chain tightening around my chest with every passing day. Daniel and I were playing with fire, and I knew it, knew that it wouldn't be long before everything would burn to the ground. Maggie had been spending more and more time away for work, leaving us with more stolen moments. But with each kiss, with each touch, I found myself growing more detached from the woman I used to be, the woman who had come to America with a sense of purpose, with a commitment to her faith, to her family, to her own identity. Now all I could think about was him. It wasn't just the physical connection anymore. It was the way he made me feel, wanted, desired, seen. And in a way that terrified me, I started to crave it more than anything. One night, after the children were asleep and Maggie was still away on another business trip, Daniel and I found ourselves in the kitchen again. The house was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that felt like the calm before a storm. He was standing at the counter, a glass of wine in his hand, staring out the window as the night grew darker. "Layla," he said softly, his voice carrying that deep, familiar tone that always seemed to reach into me, pulling me closer without a word. "We can't keep doing this." I felt the blood drain from my face. My heart skipped a beat as I turned to him. "What do you mean?" I whispered, trying to ignore the growing lump in my throat. "I mean..." He paused, his gaze flickering to mine, filled with conflict and desire. "I mean that I don't want this to end. But I can't keep lying to myself, to Maggie, to the kids. I love you, Layla. I don't know how it happened, but it did. And I can't pretend anymore." I swallowed hard, my heart thundering in my chest. Those words, "I love you," sounded like a confession, a promise, and a threat all at once. I had never imagined this would happen. I had never wanted it to. But now that he had said it, I couldn't deny the truth that had been gnawing at me. "I don't know what to do, Daniel," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The weight of the situation pressed down on me like a suffocating blanket. "I don't know if I can keep living like this." He stepped toward me, placing the wine glass on the counter. "You don't have to. We don't have to keep hiding. I'll fix it, Layla. I'll figure out a way. We can be together. We can have a life together." The intensity in his eyes made me feel dizzy, like I was standing on the edge of something dangerous but too tempting to resist. But deep down I knew the truth. This couldn't go on forever. You have a family, Daniel, I said softly, looking away from him, trying to steady my racing thoughts. You can't just throw it all away. You have Maggie, you have your children. He took a step forward, his hand cupping my cheek gently, forcing me to look at him. I'm not throwing it away. I'm finding what's been missing, Layla. And I've never felt more alive than I do with you. His words were a balm to my fractured heart, but they only made the truth sharper. What had we done? What had I done? Before I could respond, his lips found mine again, and the world around us melted into nothingness. There was no more right or wrong, no more family or faith. There was only us, the heat between us, the desperate need that consumed both of us. The kiss deepened, urgent and filled with longing, until I felt myself pulled back into the storm we had created. His hands roamed down my back, pulling me closer, the heat of his touch igniting something in me that I couldn't control. I let out a shaky breath as he lifted me in his arms, and before I could stop myself, we were in the bedroom once more. But this time was different. It wasn't just the passion that burned between us. It was the reality of what we were doing, what we were becoming. I could feel the guilt settling in, but it didn't stop me. It couldn't. I closed my eyes as his touch became more insistent, as we once again lost ourselves in the fire we had started. And for a moment there was nothing but the heat of the moment. But as the night wore on and we both lay together, tangled in sheets, the weight of what we had done began to sink in. The next morning, I awoke with a pounding headache and a heavy heart. The sun was already rising, casting a warm glow through the curtains. I tried to shake off the fog of the night before, but it was impossible. The consequences of our actions were becoming too clear to ignore. Daniel was still asleep beside me, his arm wrapped around me possessively. For a moment I let myself indulge in the feeling of being held, of being wanted. But that didn't last long. I quietly slipped out of bed, moving carefully so as not to wake him, and went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. The silence in the house felt like a warning, the calm before a storm. As I began setting the table, I couldn't stop thinking about the night before. What had we done? What was the next step? Was this just an affair? Or was it something more? But as I thought about it more, the truth hit me like a bolt of lightning. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when deep down, I knew it wasn't. The lies, the guilt, the weight of the betrayal. I couldn't bear it anymore. That afternoon, as Daniel and I sat in the living room after the children had been put down for their naps, the tension between us was palpable. The silence was thick, laden with the weight of everything we had said and done. I can't do this anymore, Daniel, I said finally, my voice breaking as I looked at him. I can't keep living in this lie. I can't keep hiding from what we've done. His face darkened with understanding, but there was no denying the pain in his eyes. Layla, I never wanted to hurt you, but I can't lose you. I won't. I shook my head, tears welling up in my eyes. You don't understand. It's not just about us. It's everything. It's everything we've destroyed. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away, standing up. I need to go. I need to leave. I need to figure out who I am again. Without you. He stood up too, desperation creeping into his voice. Layla, don't leave me. But I had already made my decision. The days that followed my confession were a blur of emotions, confusion, and regret. I had left Daniel that day, but it felt like I had left a part of myself behind. The house seemed to echo with silence, as if the walls themselves were mourning the connection that had been severed. I moved into a small, modest apartment just outside the city. It was nothing compared to the lavish home I had come from, but it offered a kind of peace I desperately needed. Every morning, I woke up with the weight of what had happened bearing down on me. The guilt, the shame, the uncertainty about the future. It consumed me. I tried to keep myself busy, work, cleaning, cooking, anything to distract myself from the memories that haunted me at night. But there was no escaping them. No escaping him. Despite my attempts to move on, thoughts of Daniel still filled my mind. His voice, his touch, the way he made me feel. I knew I had done the right thing, leaving him, leaving that life behind. But the truth was, I missed him. I missed everything about him. It was a cold afternoon when Daniel showed up at my door. I hadn't expected him, hadn't thought I'd see him again. But there he was, standing on the other side of the door, his expression conflicted, torn between pain and determination. "Layla," he said softly, his voice breaking the silence. "Can we talk?" I stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to slam the door shut, to avoid the heartache, to protect myself from the storm I knew he would bring. But another part of me, the part that still loved him, that still felt that deep, unspoken connection, yearned to let him in. I stepped back, allowing him to enter. He looked around the small apartment, his eyes scanning the sparse furnishings, the bare walls. It wasn't much, but it was mine. "I'm sorry for showing up like this," he said quietly, his voice rough. "But I couldn't leave it like this. I can't let you go, Layla. I thought that if I gave you space, if I let you go, you'd find peace. But I was wrong." I felt a lump form in my throat, the emotions threatening to spill over. "Daniel, we can't keep doing this," I whispered, my voice trembling. "It's not just about us. It's about everything we've destroyed. The lies, the betrayal. I can't keep living in this mess." He stepped forward, reaching for my hand, his touch gentle but insistent. "I love you, Layla. I don't care about the lies anymore. I don't care about the past. All I care about is you. I need you. I don't want to live without you." I pulled my hand away, feeling the sting of his words. "But you have a family, Daniel. You have Maggie. You have everything I could never have given you. And I can't be the person who ruins that for you." He shook his head, his eyes pleading. "You're not ruining anything, Layla. I am. I'm the one who let things go this far. I'm the one who can't stop thinking about you, about us. You've made me realize what I'm missing. And I'm not going to lose that." Tears welled up in my eyes as I took a step back. "But you have to let me go," I said softly. "You have to." I spent the next few days alone, reflecting on everything that had happened, on the choices I had made and the life I had left behind. I knew I couldn't keep running from the truth, from the reality of what Daniel and I had done. But I also knew I had to make a choice. A real choice. I couldn't keep living in this in-between space. I had to either move forward away from him, or take a leap into the unknown and let go of everything I had ever known. One evening, as I sat in my small apartment, I made my decision. I reached for my phone, dialing Daniel's number. It rang once, then twice before he answered, his voice filled with hesitation. "Layla, I need to see you," I said, my voice steady but laced with uncertainty. "We need to talk." We met in the small park near my apartment, the place where I had spent countless hours thinking, reflecting on everything. It was a cold evening, and the wind rustled the bare trees, but I hardly noticed the chill. All that mattered was the decision that lay ahead. Daniel was waiting for me, his face solemn, as though he already knew what was coming. I felt my heart beat in my chest, faster with each step I took toward him. "Layla, please," he said before I could speak. "I need you to know that I will never forget what we had. But I also know I can't keep asking you to be a part of my life, not like this. You're right, we've destroyed too much, and I don't want to be the reason you lose yourself." I looked up at him, my heart aching with the weight of his words. He had finally let go. And with that, something inside of me shifted. "I love you, Daniel," I whispered, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "But I can't be the one who holds you back. I can't keep living in the shadow of what we've done." Tears filled his eyes as he took a step forward, his hand reaching for mine, but I stepped back. "You deserve more than this," I said softly. "You deserve a life that isn't built on lies. I'm going to find my own way. I have to. For me. For my family. For my faith." He nodded, his face a mixture of sorrow and understanding. "I know, Layla. I know. And I will always love you. But I'll let you go. I'll let you go." As we parted ways that evening, I felt the weight of everything we had been through, the passion, the guilt, the heartache, fall away from me. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew one thing for certain. I had to find myself again. And this time I would do it on my own. And that's it for today's story. I'd love to hear what you think. Leave a comment below and share your feelings. Did you relate to any of the characters? Or if you were in their shoes, what decisions would you make? I'd love to hear from all of you. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. And if you didn't, hit one. Subscribe so you don't miss out on more great content. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a great day.